More than 3 millennia ago, a veil descended upon the minds of men. A subtle, almost imperceptible mist, indistinguishable from light itself, began to shape the perception of what we now call the Bible. An illusion so fine that few dared to question its depth. How many of us have turned these pages believing we were reading the history of a people, believing we were perceiving ancient laws or moralizing tales, without realizing that behind each word lies an echo of the divine, a whisper that only those who listen with their hearts can hear? What if what we thought we knew was merely the surface of a vast ocean, an ocean whose true waters remain invisible, inaccessible to ordinary perception? Benitez, with his penetrating gaze, reminds us that the Bible is not simply a collection of stories frozen in time. He invites us to see beyond the sentences, to seek the invisible network of symbols and messages that transcends generations. These words, these stories, are not merely fragments of history or morality. They are keys, gateways that connect the human soul to that which is greater than itself. Behind every patriarch, every king, every prophet, lies a hidden truth, a teaching that becomes perceptible only when we learn to read with a different perspective, a perspective capable of discerning light through shadow, capable of perceiving the living breath of God behind each narrative. Let's consider Genesis 6 verses 1 to 4, the passage where the sons of God see the daughters of men, and beget beings whose stature and strength gave rise to legends of giants. The traditional interpretation often reduces this story to an ancient tale, one myth among many. But what if we looked at it differently? What if this passage revealed a more subtle reality, that of a humanity in search of a lost divinity, of a broken connection with its celestial source? Noah's Ark, more than just a boat, could symbolize human consciousness preserving divine light, capable of weathering the tides of chaos and doubt. Isn't this a striking image of our own inner journey, the spirit seeking to protect itself, to preserve itself in the face of life's storms? Each verse of the Bible can be seen as a secret door, each parable as a labyrinth of light and shadow, a path whose course is visible only to those who know how to contemplate. Tradition, sometimes rigid, has often obscured these dimensions or interpreted them through the narrow prism of dogma and human history. But if one learns to truly listen, the text breathes. It whispers in the wind, it makes itself heard in the voices of the prophets, it resonates in the clamor of events, and above all, it expresses itself in the silences, those empty spaces where the divine presence slips in and is felt more intensely than in the words themselves. Imagine that each story, each miracle, each parable is a mirror that reflects not only the external world but also your own conscience. The person who doubts God's existence finds themselves face to face with themselves, confronted by their fears, their questions, their hopes. The person who meditates on these texts discovers a silent dialogue with the divine, a breath that transcends the ages and transforms reading into a living experience. Genesis, Exodus, the Psalms, the Gospels, all these texts become invitations to inner exploration. The Bible then is no longer simply a book. It becomes a spiritual labyrinth where every turn holds a secret, a hidden light, a call to contemplate the invisible. It is fascinating to observe that this veil of illusion began over 3,000 years ago, yet persists to this day, enveloping our perceptions, dictating our beliefs, and limiting our ability to see the true depth of the text. What if the real challenge were not to understand the Bible intellectually, but to grasp it with the soul? Every word, every silence, every repetition then takes on new meaning. The reader is invited to lose themselves in order to find themselves again, to navigate between narratives and symbols, to ask questions that find no immediate answer in the rational world. What is truth? Where does illusion begin? And above all, where is the divine light revealed that has shone through these pages for millennia? Through this journey, we will not only seek to uncover what has been forgotten or hidden, but to feel the living presence of God in every breath, in every line. We will go where time no longer holds sway, where history intertwines with symbolism, and where faith meets reason in a silent yet vibrant space. We will explore the Bible not as a fixed historical document, but as a mirror of our own existence, a reflection of the mysteries of the human soul and the invisible realities that surround us, and we will ask ourselves whether, behind the illusion of 3 millennia, there might not be hidden the revelation of a light older than time itself. To understand the Bible differently, we must first be willing to leave the familiar territory of the literal narrative and venture into lesser-known corners, into the apocryphal texts and traditions not included in the official canon. For these texts, often ignored or marginalized, hold unsuspected treasures. They confront us with a reading that transcends mere intellect, a reading that engages the soul and intuition. In the Book of Enoch, for example, there is mention of these fallen angels, the watchers who teach forbidden sciences to humankind, knowledge from another world. Genesis, for its part, calls these beings sons of God. But what does this appellation truly mean? Is it not, fundamentally, an attempt to convey contact with a higher reality, invisible and inaccessible to ordinary senses? A contact that transcends space, time, and language, and that directly touches human consciousness? Let us look at Exodus 3 verse 14, where God says to Moses, "I am who I am." At first glance, this verse seems simple, almost commonplace in its wording. And yet, it possesses a breathtaking depth. Benitez emphasizes that these words are not merely an affirmation of existence, but an invitation to enter into divine consciousness. Here, the Bible does not simply narrate events. It opens a silent dialogue between the reader and the source of all life. Every letter, every sound of this sentence carries a timeless echo, a vibration that can awaken the soul if one knows how to listen. This verse, when meditated upon deeply, becomes a gateway to an understanding that transcends logic, a key that allows one to feel the constant presence of God across time and space. The Book of Jubilees offers a complementary perspective. It precisely describes the sacred calendar, the cycles of the moon and sun, and the auspicious times for festivals and ceremonies. These details, which may seem trivial to the modern reader, actually constitute a code designed to harmonize humanity with the cosmos. Aligning human time with the rhythm of the heavens is not a mere ritual exercise. It is an invitation to perceive the invisible architecture of creation. Those who study these texts discover that the Bible is not limited to moral precepts, but that it offers a secret language capable of synchronizing the soul with the universal order. Humanity is not merely a spectator of history, it is called to become a participant in cosmic harmony. But the biblical text is not simply a collection of historical facts or laws. Each story is a symbol, each event a vibration meant to awaken consciousness. The stories of Abraham, Moses, David, and the prophets are not merely chronicles of the past. They are mirrors of each reader's inner journey. The trials they face, loneliness, doubt, fear, incomprehension, are the same as those we encounter in our own lives. The fall of Adam and Eve, often reduced to mere disobedience, actually reveals the birth of consciousness. Separation, the feeling of loss, and the confrontation with the shadow become necessary steps to understanding the light and recognizing the divinity within us. Similarly, miracles are not simply isolated supernatural interventions, but symbols designed to awaken our perception. When Jesus multiplies the loaves and fishes, Matthew 14 verses 13 to 21, it is not merely a physical act of provision. It is an invitation to understand the abundance that arises when the human spirit aligns with the divine will. The miracle becomes an instrument of inner transformation. The waters of the Red Sea parting at Moses' hand, the ark crossing the flood, the visions of Daniel and Ezekiel, all these compose a narrative that transcends time and space. The Bible then becomes a living, vibrant text, each word of which resonates with the presence of God, a vibration that the intellect alone cannot grasp. Reading the Bible in this way requires patience, attention, and humility. It is not enough to simply skim the words. One must allow oneself to be imbued with their energy, listen to the silences, and feel the spaces between the sentences. Each passage is a point of contact between the human and the divine, a place where consciousness can encounter truth beyond appearances. The apocryphal texts, often neglected, offer new perspectives on biblical figures, on the nature of angels, and on the origin of sacred knowledge. These writings remind us that Scripture is not static, that it contains multiple layers, like a diamond whose facets reflect a different light depending on the angle from which they are viewed. Thus, scriptural exploration becomes an inner journey, a quest to perceive the invisible structures behind the words. It is not merely the history of a people or the chronicle of its laws and wars. It is the map of an inner universe, the tracing of the soul's paths toward the light. The Bible, when read with the necessary attention, transforms into a mirror of our own existence, a silent dialogue between the visible and the invisible, between the earthly and the heavenly. Each passage holds a vibration, each story a secret teaching. And those who learn to listen, to read with the soul as much as with the mind, discover that the text speaks not only to past generations, but to us here and now, in this precise moment of our inner quest. The language of the Bible is the language of symbols, a language the human eye often looks at without understanding, but which speaks directly to the soul. Every element, the sea, the desert, the light, the shadow, is never innocent. These images are not mere scenery, they are gateways. The sea that parts before Moses, the desert that spreads its silence over the Hebrew people, the fire that descends upon Sinai, the shadow that accompanies humankind's steps in the Psalms. All of this is not descriptive, but initiatory. Each symbol evokes an inner reality, a state of consciousness that a superficial reading cannot reach. The flood, often interpreted as a universal event of destruction, takes on another dimension when read through the symbolic prism. It becomes inner purification, the human consciousness, overwhelmed by its illusions, attachments, and fears, ready to be reborn in the light, like a spirit cleansed of its erroneous certainties. The name of God, YHWH, transcends the mere arrangement of letters. It is vibration, code, ancestral memory that resonates in the soul of those who know how to listen. Benitez emphasizes that the ceaseless repetition of names, genealogies, and cycles in Scripture is not simply historical reiteration. It is a symbolic teaching, a map of humanity's inner cosmos. The prophets, with their visions and words, do not merely convey a message for their time. They offer a guide for every reader capable of perceiving the invisible, capable of distinguishing the tangible from the essential. Reading then becomes initiation, each passage echoing our own inner structure, a way of recognizing the forces that govern the world and the soul. Let us consider the symbol of the cross. In the New Testament, it is seen as the point of convergence of heaven and earth, of the human and the divine. But before Jesus, forms of the cross appear in various contexts. In Egypt, in ancient mythologies as axes of the universe, intersections of time and eternity. The cross symbolizes the place where the visible meets the invisible, where shadow touches light, where matter converses with spirit. Every biblical narrative, every parable, possesses this dual layer, a narrative surface and a symbolic depth. Those who know how to contemplate, meditate, and listen to the breath of the invisible perceive in it the keys to an inner reading, an invitation to align their own existence with the cosmic and spiritual rhythm that the text proposes. The numbers themselves become codes. 7, 12, 40. Each number carries a vibration. 7 days of creation, 12 tribes of Israel, 40 days of fasting by Moses on Mount Sinai or by Jesus in the desert. These numbers are not chronological markers but symbolic guides. They invite us to observe the cycles of the Spirit, the rhythms that connect humanity to the divine, and to perceive the harmony hidden behind the appearances of the world. The Bible, seen through this lens, becomes a mirror not only of the external world, but above all of the reader's inner depths, a mirror in which the soul recognizes its own rhythms and its own mysteries. And what about the angels and celestial beings? Their presence is not limited to narration. They represent the invisible forces, the guides of consciousness, those who awaken humanity to its own divinity and inner responsibility. The visions of Daniel, Ezekiel, and John in Revelation are not mere fantastical stories. They are symbolic maps for navigating the unseen, invitations to see through illusions, to recognize the truth behind the veil of appearances, and to attain inner light. Every detail of these visions, the wheel, the creatures, the light, is a coded symbol intended for those who can see with their minds as well as their eyes. From this perspective, every element of the Bible becomes an instrument for awakening intuition. Names, places, objects, times, and numbers are not there by chance. The desert evokes the solitude necessary for inner meditation, water, purification, and the flow of life, light, revelation, and consciousness, shadow, the unconscious aspects that humankind must integrate. The text thus becomes a mirror, and the reader a seeker who, through the contemplation of symbols, learns to discern the invisible. Scripture acts as a universal code, a subtle vibration that speaks not only to the intellect but directly to consciousness, awakening what lies dormant in the depths of our being. The Bible's rich symbolism also unfolds in its cycles and repetitions. Genealogies, festivals, rituals, everything is designed to create an inner rhythm, an echo of the cosmic order. This is not a matter of chronology or simple enumeration, but a subtle orchestration intended to align the human soul with the divine. Those who know how to listen can hear these rhythms, feel the vibrations that resonate through the ages and connect each generation to the original source, to that light hidden behind the words. Symbolic reading thus transforms the text into a living guide, an initiatory path where each element becomes a springboard for inner awakening, and each symbol, a key to unlocking the mysteries of the soul and the cosmos. When we contemplate the Bible as a living text, each verse becomes a silent prayer, each story a guide for the soul. Psalm 19 verse 1 proclaims, "The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands." But this heaven is not merely external, it dwells in the human heart, and the Bible becomes the instrument through which this glory can be perceived. Benitez prompts us to ask an essential question. What if the true reading of the Bible were not intellectual but internal? What if understanding the text meant awakening a spiritual resonance, sensing the presence of God behind every letter, every silence? Faith then becomes active listening, a meditation where the reader is no longer a mere observer, but a participant in the mystery. The parables of Jesus take on a renewed meaning here. The parable of the sower, Matthew 13 verses 1 to 23, teaches not only the reception of the divine message in the world, but also how each human conscience can welcome or reject the light. The trials of the prophets and saints are no longer distant anecdotes, but invitations to purify our vision, to distinguish illusion from truth. The journey offered by this reading of the Bible is an inner one. Discovering that illusion began 3,500 years ago is not a condemnation but a call. A call to emerge from ignorance, to transcend superficial interpretations, to contemplate the divine light hidden behind the words. The awakened soul begins to perceive what the rational mind cannot grasp: the living presence of God in the text, the sacred breath that permeates the ages, and the revelation that the Word is not simply a book, but a mirror of eternity. Thus, each reading becomes an initiation, each verse a guide. And those who dare to cross the threshold of illusion will discover that the Bible is not what they thought. It is much more, an intimate dialogue between man and God, a journey toward the light that has always awaited contemplation by those who know how to see with their hearts.